That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, I'm not going to lie. This is going to be a very tough video to make because, of course, when you were making Dynasty rankings halfway through the year, there are so many moving variables, not only the recent performance that you have by given players, not only the fact that some teams are rebuilding, some teams are competing, not only the fact that we have and really need to make sure that we are not overreacting to the small sample that we have had in 2021. Rather, we are looking at pretty much everything that we have had through these players' careers so far and their prospect profiles coming into the NFL. On top of this, we have to keep in mind the Dynasty marketplace and how you're going to be able to sell some players at a higher mark. So in theory, they should be a little bit higher in your rankings. So there are a ton of moving variables, and that's why it took me a decent amount of time to get out our official Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings over there on Patreon, which of course have already been posted. And I was not telling people that we are going to continue to update those as the season goes on because I'm not going to lie to you. It's so damn hard. That's why very rarely do you ever see someone go out and put a solid list of Dynasty rankings out halfway through the season. But I just had so much fun doing it that I think we may continue to update those over on Patreon every single week. I mean, I kind of playing around with this right now after the blow-up 200-yard performance by Jamar Chase, trying to figure out how we are going to shape up these top 12 wide receivers. And I'm going to go through. Of course, I'm not going to give the entire list here. You can find the entire list of our Dynasty rankings over there on Patreon. That gets in the description of the video. Go join a Dynasty League with us. Go get in our group chat. Support the channel. I mean, you can do so much stuff over there on Patreon. But nonetheless, let me go through and let me run through our top 12 wide receivers. Of course, go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. Only if you play Dynasty. If you do not play Dynasty or in a keeper format, I'm sorry, this is not the channel for you. And also go down there, leave that comment letting me know why I am stupid and why we need to be adjusting these rankings. But let's lead it off with our wide receiver one. And I sent out a tweet a couple days ago saying that Jamar Chase could easily have the argument to be made for him to be the wide receiver one. I don't think we're going to do it. I actually think we're going to go with Justin Jefferson here. And now with Justin Jefferson, of course, this wide receiver isn't necessarily up there in terms of what he has with his quarterback play or what the efficiency on a per target basis has been so far this season. But Justin Jefferson, now we've had, I mean, just the continued success of leading into his second year. And I think this is something that's going to continue to go on. And that if you're looking at Justin Jefferson so far this season, this is a 22-year-old wide receiver that is currently a top 10 option in fantasy. And I honestly feel like he's kind of flying under the radar, and it's crazy to say that. But I mean, with Justin Jefferson, he hasn't had one of those 36-point weeks that you've seen from Cooper Kupp. I mean, it's more so just been that consistent 18 to 20 fantasy points. I mean, you're kind of seeing him just stay in that pocket. And with Justin Jefferson, one thing that's very notable is the fact that this is a wide receiver that has averaged damn near 10 targets a game. I mean, if you're pulling up what he did his rookie season, obviously Justin Jefferson was the league-winning wide receiver of 2020. You do not need me to tell you that. But going back to what we actually had from Justin Jefferson, this was a wide receiver that was dominant. He was a low-end wide receiver one off a very small sample size. He actually only had 7.81 targets per game back in 2020. Now, seeing that volume going in the right direction is 100% just impactful in our projections for the long-term success that you will have with Justin Jefferson. And that's naturally what you expect from that rookie to that second-year jump. I mean, with those rookies, if they hit from a fantasy football context, the majority of the time, they're not necessarily coming out getting 11 targets a game. It's more so that they are just so damn efficient with those targets that they have. They're providing you those big plays, which is what we saw from Justin Jefferson his rookie year. But despite a sophomore slump, despite whatever anybody may have been predicting, no, I mean, he's come out, he's been yet again a top 10 wide receiver, and it just looks so damn consistent. And if you're projecting this team out next year as well, Adam Thielen is someone that's just getting older. I mean, at this point, I know Adam Thielen hasn't necessarily been at the very top of fantasy football over the past decade, but keep in mind, he had a very late breakout in his own NFL career. So Adam Thielen, for a lot of people, they don't necessarily see how old he actually is. He's already turned 31 years old. So next year will be his age 32 season. Let me pull up his contract really quick. That way we can go through and look at the guaranteed money. And I'll say it's a little bit different than a running back. I'd imagine that Minnesota is actually going to be willing to pay that contract. I mean, even if there's no dead money per se on it. Yeah, so if you're looking at his deal, he's getting paid $12 million next year. I mean, he doesn't really have much guaranteed money beyond 2022, but it looks like he 100% is going to be on this roster in 2022, regardless of what happens the rest of the way. But you would naturally assume that Justin Jefferson continues to increase his role. This was a great prospect coming into the NFL draft. He was a dominant rookie. He's continued that success through his sophomore year, so we have a little bit of a larger sample with it. There's a path for him to continue to expand his role with Adam Thielen maybe getting phased out, and with Adam Thielen not having as large of a role in the red zone. So we're going to go Justin Jefferson at wide receiver 1, and we're going to be ranking him one spot above Jamar Chase. And let me get out of here and say, of course, I have to admit, with rookie draft season this year, I was calling Jamar Chase one of the worst draft picks in rookie drafts. Just saying that, yes, he is an elite wide receiver prospect, but still at the same time, if you're looking at historical trends, investing into that round 1 rookie running back that checks every single box, whether that's Najee Harris, whether that's Travis Etienne, those were the players that I was wanting to go with. We were wanting to go with those running backs, knowing that it's harder to find that production at that position. And also, you usually get that early breakout from the running back position, and you get that elite jump in value that's a lot more predictable than wide receiver. But it doesn't really matter at this point. Jamar Chase has come out his rookie season, and Jamar Chase so far this year has been more productive than Justin Jefferson on a per game basis. Right now, Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 4 in points per game. He has been unbelievable. And going back to what we were previously saying, it's not like Jamar Chase has been doing this based on the volume that he is getting in Cincinnati. No, he's been doing this based off of that efficiency. I mean, right now, if you compare these two wide receivers, Justin Jefferson has actually played one less game than Jamar Chase. However, has 59 targets in 2021 compared to Jamar Chase having 51. And this is something I want to say. Of course, you're going to predict that Jamar Chase alongside Joe Burrow is most likely going to be a more efficient wide receiver if you assume that these two talents are the same, knowing that Joe Burrow is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, knowing at the same time that opposing defenses kind of have to key in on T. Higgins just a little bit here, which can give the space for Jamar Chase to possibly pop off over the top behind those safeties. Now with Chase, the one thing that I want to look at is the difference between the long-term outlook on himself versus what you're going to get from Justin Jefferson, and that we're expecting Adam Thielen to get phased out of Minnesota, whereas in Cincinnati, T. Higgins on that rookie deal was drafted in 2020. And if you're looking at Tyler Boyd's contract and just what we have historically seen from the Cincinnati Bengals, and we know that Cincinnati, for whatever reason, this is a team that loves to keep their players in their organization. I mean, very rarely are they churning through these guys once they get to their second contracts. And with Tyler Boyd, I mean, this is someone that is only getting paid $8 million in 2022. Yeah, they could save about $5 million if they decided to cut him, but I would be very surprised if they decided to do just that. So with Jamar Chase, you may be able to come out here and make an argument that he is a better wide receiver than Justin Jefferson, playing with the better quarterback. But A, we have a much smaller sample size of that elite level production compared to what we have had from Justin Jefferson at a season and a half now. And B, he's also going to have more target competition going forward with both Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins in 2022 and in 2023. So I would love to know your opinion. I understand the thought process to have Jamar Chase at 1 overall. I can't necessarily do it. We're going to have him in the same tier alongside Justin Jefferson. And it's funny, we have those two former LSU teammates at 1 and 2. And let's go down to our wide receiver 3. And this player is going to be in the same exact tier here. This will be DK Metcalf, who hasn't been nearly as productive as Jamar Chase this season, but it's kind of understandable if you're just looking at the fact that he's been playing without Russell Wilson over the past few weeks. I mean, this is someone that in the first 4 weeks of this season, if you were removing what we had with Geno Smith, I mean, you get 5 targets in week 1. Sure, that's kind of bad, but it doesn't really matter when DK Metcalf is DK Metcalf. 4 receptions, 60 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. And one thing that I want to point out with DK Metcalf is the fact that, yes, he was getting close to 8-9 targets a game with Russell Wilson, but we definitely have to point out that this Seattle Seahawks offense is a complete outlier with what you have with the rest of the NFL. And we've seen this from years of Seattle, and I am very surprised to see that Shane Waldron did not change this in the slightest. But this is the slowest offense in the NFL in terms of the amount of plays that they run per game. So you don't necessarily expect to ever see the volume in Seattle. It's a complete outlier offense. It's very similar to how we need to be viewing the Tennessee Titans as a team that, I mean, we can kind of throw league trends. We can throw historical trends out the window, knowing that they play a completely different brand of football. And with Russell Wilson being near the very top of the NFL in his historical efficiency every single season, I mean, this is a quarterback that we know is going to be able to just give such a high floor to this entire offense and that high ceiling. DK Metcalf still is only 23. I mean, clearly before the Russell Wilson injury showed us that he was on track to just have yet again another elite season. So I'm going to have DK Metcalf at wide receiver 3. I know he hasn't been as productive as what you've had from Jamar Chase, but we're going to have them in the same tier because we've also had the larger sample with DK Metcalf to look at, and he is still an extremely young wide receiver. Now, our last wide receiver in tier 1 here is also going to be another Ole Miss former wide receiver in A.J. Brown. Really funny that we have 4 wide receivers in our top tier with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf, and A.J. Brown, and this makes up 2 collegiate football teams. I mean, hilarious here. And with A.J. Brown, we get the breakout this past week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Call it the breakout. This was someone that clearly we knew was going to come out and dominate after coming back from being injured, but still with A.J. Brown, one thing that I want to point out is the fact that you probably can buy him at a discount. I would not be surprised if you could go through and flip Jamar Chase for A.J. Brown plus a little bit. I mean, if you're looking at A.J. Brown this season, I know the production has been really up and down. We have seen such a weird year for Brown himself in that in week 1 against the Cardinals, a perfectly fine performance. He gets 8 targets, comes away with almost 15 fantasy points. Now in week 2 against the Seahawks, this is kind of where it went out the window, where he led his team in targets. One thing that I want to point out is it doesn't matter if Julio Jones is good to go or not. It doesn't matter, I mean, what you see with anybody else in this offense. A.J. Brown, every single week that he has been healthy in Tennessee, has come out and he has led this team in targets, where in week 2 against the Seattle Seahawks, he had 9 targets in this performance. He gets injured in week 3. He's out week 4. He comes out against the Jags in week 5. I mean, he's still kind of injured. He was a game time decision, but he comes out and he ends up leading the team in targets. Then 9 targets in week 6 and week 7. And very similar to what we were talking about with DK Metcalf, just a super weird offense to look at with the way that they use Derrick Henry, just with what you see from their run to pass split. But still, I think with A.J. Brown, very similar to what we've been saying previously. This is a wide receiver that if you're looking at the larger sample, this is someone that has shown us through 3 years now that he is that elite talent. He is still incredibly young. You will not have Julio Jones next season either. So I think that while a lot of people want to just go through and say that Jamar Chase is in a completely different tier of what you may have with A.J. Brown, I think that, yes, we probably need to be ranking Jamar Chase over Brown himself, but at the same time, you can easily see no Julio Jones next year. Without Julio Jones, I mean, A.J. Brown could jump up and say, go right back to being a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy. So let me know what y'all are thinking about this top tier, but I think we're going to have it ranked Jefferson, Chase, DK Metcalf, and A.J. Brown. And now let's get to our tier 2 of wide receivers. And let's go with someone who has been disappointing as of late, but we're going to bet on the talent. And let's go with Tyreek Hill at wide receiver 5 here. He's going to lead off tier 2. And with Tyreek Hill, obviously this is an asset for a contending team. You're not trading for Tyreek Hill if you're playing for 2022 rather than 2021. This is a wide receiver so far this season is actually the wide receiver 2. I'm kind of surprised to see that, but it's mainly been fueled off of those 2 massive blow-up spots that he's had. One against the Eagles where he dropped almost 50 fantasy points. Another week against the Browns where he dropped damn near 40 points. So with Tyreek Hill, this is someone that I want to just take a step back, he's attached to Patrick Mahomes essentially through the rest of his NFL career. And if you're going to be looking at this situation, Travis Kelce is 32 years old. Possibly this Kansas City Chiefs team can just stop turning the ball over and you get Tyreek Hill to have that elite league-breaking potential during the second half of the season if they can sustain drives, if they can begin to get more red zone opportunities. So it's kind of a spot where there's not much to say. We know who Tyreek Hill is. He is that very productive win-now asset. I'm a little concerned with Tyreek Hill, although he is only 27, that maybe this is a wide receiver that falls off a little earlier than you would see with other veterans, given the fact that he kind of relies on his athleticism rather than his route running or his hands. But still, I mean, I think it's good enough to have him at wide receiver 5. And our next wide receiver we will have at wide receiver 6. One thing that I want to point out is, while he may be the elite option this year, he's going to be 29 in a few months. And honestly, now that we say this out loud, we may have to move him lower than this. Davante Adams. I think we have to move Davante Adams lower because Davante Adams is going to be 29 in December. And one thing that I know we don't necessarily want to talk about a lot right now because we're halfway through the year, but remember what happened with Aaron Rodgers this offseason. I don't think this situation's solved. I mean, I think that Aaron Rodgers, given the fact that he really didn't have any leverage with his contract situation this past offseason, I think that maybe the Green Bay Packers just called his bluff. They told him, hey, you know what? Sit out a year. Let's see what happens. And then maybe they look to actually move him to Denver this upcoming season. I don't necessarily think that's out of the range of outcomes. And obviously, Davante Adams had his own contract dispute. Doesn't necessarily sound like he's in love with the Packers organization either. And I think if you split this duo up, Davante Adams, he has to fall from, he's not necessarily falling to be a wide receiver that's all of a sudden the wide receiver 12 in fantasy, but he's not going to be a locked and loaded top 3 option every single year. Yeah, you're looking at this Aaron Rodgers contract. It looks like he does actually begin to get that leverage in 2022, and that will be his last year under contract. Ooh, okay, so this is really interesting. I think we actually have to move Davante Adams lower. You know what? We're going to move Davante Adams down to wide receiver 8. And instead, we are going to be most likely moving DJ Moore up here to wide receiver 6. And with DJ Moore, I know this is probably coming out of left field for a lot of people. With DJ Moore, this has been a wide receiver that so far this season has been the wide receiver 8. And I know it doesn't necessarily show that he's popping off the page. Very similar with Justin Jefferson. It's kind of just been that steadied production. And with DJ Moore, I know that they give Robbie Anderson the contract extension coming into the year, but clearly Robbie Anderson looks like someone that's not going to be making an impact at all, and he can easily be phased out of this offense next season if you do get Terrace Marshall being able to take that step up. And with DJ Moore, I know he's been in the NFL since 2018. This was a wide receiver that one of the reasons you love drafting him is based on the fact that he was incredibly young and he was going to continue to improve at the wide receiver position. He's only 24 years old. He's the same age as what you actually have with AJ Brown. If you're looking at Robbie Anderson, he does have a decent amount of guaranteed money in 2022, so he's going to be on the field, but who even knows if they're going to be having him run routes with how horribly inefficient he has been so far this season. So yeah, we're going to have DJ Moore here at wide receiver 6. I think based on what we have seen historically with him back in his second year combined with what we've had now, this is a large sample of a young, productive wide receiver that I think we want to go through and bet on. Now, our wide receiver 7 is going to be CeeDee Lamb. This is a wide receiver attached to Dak Prescott that I want to say it can honestly get better. If we have one outcome in particular, I think we need to move CeeDee Lamb up from wide receiver 7 to wide receiver 5, actually ahead of Tyreek Hill. And that would be if we get Michael Gallup out of this offense. And CeeDee Lamb so far this season has been incredibly productive. This has been someone that's averaged 18 fantasy points per game. If you're looking at a points per game basis, CeeDee Lamb is actually up there at wide receiver 13 at only 22 years old. Now, if you're going to be looking at the contract situation for Amari Cooper as well, you know what? This is kind of why I love talking through these dynasty rankings, because I hate to do this yet again halfway through the video, but you pull up the Amari Cooper contract here, and it's looking like in 2022, this is a wide receiver that has $6 million in the dead cap, and he's owed $20 million. And they're going to have to either re-sign Michael Gallup or let Michael Gallup walk. So I would imagine, you know what? You're most likely getting either CeeDee Lamb playing alongside Amari Cooper with no Michael Gallup next year, or CeeDee Lamb playing alongside Michael Gallup with no Amari Cooper. They've already paid Dak Prescott that mega extension. Dak Prescott clearly looks like he's that elite pocket passing quarterback at this point. This offense looks fantastic. So I apologize to do this yet again, but I think we're going to be moving CeeDee Lamb actually up to wide receiver 5 here. He's going to be alongside Tyreek Hill and DJ Moore at the very top of this tier. But CeeDee Lamb, he's 22 years old and he's already up there in the production, and the situation can get better next season. So yeah, I think we have to love what we've had with CeeDee Lamb. Now, our official wide receiver 8 now will be Davante Adams. We've already talked about him a little bit. Let's move on from that. Let's go to our wide receiver 9, Cooper Kupp. Now with Cooper Kupp, this is someone that I know a lot of people are going to have higher than this. Clearly, if you are a contending roster, you want to have Cooper Kupp higher. And I know Cooper Kupp drafted in 2017, so it doesn't seem like he's that old, but he stayed all 5 years in college. So surprisingly, you're going to see that Cooper Kupp is already 28 years old. Next year, he will be 29. And with Cooper Kupp, I don't want to have him above Davante Adams, and that with Davante Adams, we have had a very large sample now of just only elite level production, where with Cooper Kupp, he's been a little bit more up and down. I know now he's Matthew Stafford, is a little bit of a different situation. So we will have them ranked back-to-back in the same tier. But let me know what y'all think. Do you think we've seen enough to have Cooper Kupp ranked over Davante Adams in Dynasty? And Dynasty is a little bit different than redraft. I really try to not overreact to a small sample, but I think we will have Cooper Kupp at wide receiver 9. Now let's go down to a wide receiver 10 here, which will be Stefon Diggs. With Stefon Diggs, you could easily make the argument for Diggs himself to be higher than this. If you're looking at the production this season, it has definitely been down. He's actually down near wide receiver 20 on a points per game basis. But this is mainly fueled off the fact that this has been someone who's kind of been unlucky with touchdowns so far. He has averaged about 10 targets a game in one of the most productive offenses in football. Clearly, he's attached to Josh Allen for a very long time. He's about to turn 28 years old, so he's another one of these assets that, I mean, he's a win-now guy attached to an elite-level quarterback. You're expecting wide receiver 1 production when you have him. But the problem is, if he's going to outscore, say, CeeDee Lamb by 2 points per game the rest of the way here, would you rather have CeeDee Lamb, who's giving you 2 points per game less right now, that's 22 years old? Or would you rather have Stefon Diggs plus his extra 2 points per game at 28 years old? I think we would prefer those younger wide receivers, so we will have Diggs at 10. We're going to have Calvin Ridley at 11. I know Calvin Ridley in that same draft class as DJ Moore. I mean, Calvin Ridley, you can make the argument, well, Mason, he's young like DJ Moore right now. He's actually about to turn 27 years old, which is crazy to say when DJ Moore is only 24. And with Calvin Ridley, it's not like he stayed 5 years at Alabama or anything. What's really funny is Calvin Ridley actually stayed forever into high school. No idea why that happened, but he's an older wide receiver at this point. He's not in that same tiers like DJ Moore, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson with his age. And also, if you're looking at the team situation, it's just really not favorable with Matt Ryan in Atlanta. We don't necessarily know what the quarterback of the future looks like. Thank God they didn't go all in to get Justin Fields. Oh my God, imagine if they would have taken Justin Fields over Kyle Pitts. That would have been disgusting. But nonetheless, the quarterback situation's a little uncertain. I actually really like Calvin Ridley as like a buy low candidate for a contending roster, because this is someone that's averaged over 5 targets a game so far this year. He's averaged almost 11 targets a game. And yeah, the production hasn't been sky high, but he has scored 10 points every single contest. I think he's a high floor win now wide receiver that would be intriguing if you're trying to push for 2021, but in the long term, have a little bit more uncertainty with Ridley than some of these other players. And our last wide receiver at wide receiver 12 here, we're just going to suck it up. We're just going to rank him. Terry McLaurin. We're going to put Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 12. Very similar to what you actually have with a couple of these other guys. I mean, older than expected. This is a player that's already 26 years old, even though this is his 3rd year in the NFL. He stayed all 5 years at Ohio State. And with Terry McLaurin, the production hasn't been fantastic so far this season. One thing that's surprising, though, and one thing that's honestly probably bullish for Terry McLaurin in the long term, is that this Washington defense is really struggling. I mean, we expected this to be an elite defense coming into the season. However, they have not been that so far, which is great because you want Terry McLaurin to be on a bad team. That way they can finally find an answer at quarterback. That way they can finally find a high draft pick. So hopefully Terry McLaurin and the Washington football team can get their quarterback in the future next year. But still, Terry McLaurin is exactly who you thought he was coming into the season. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Please make sure you go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And of course, you can find our Dynasty rankings over there on Patreon. And yeah, I think that's all we got for you. Really hope that you enjoyed the video, and I really hope you have a great day.